podcast, and today is Told You Twice. Today I have here with me Andrea Berthot. Andrea, wave.
Hello.
I have David Hammons.
Hello, good morning. Or good evening for those of us across the
Oh, sorry. That's right, it's night for some of you. It is 6 a.m. for me and one of our guests. I'll introduce her in a minute. So Ben Alderson as well.
Hi.
And Robyn McIntyre. Robyn is also up at the crack of dawn, so thank you.
Hi there.
All right, everyone. So today we are discussing retellings and adaptions from literary works, fairy tales, classics, you name it. And this is kind of a really neat thing because we've seen it a lot in modern writing, and we've seen it a lot in movies, things like Once Upon a Time on TV, I'm sure you guys have seen. So it's starting to kind of really kick in a trend, and we just wanted to discuss what makes it good, what makes it different from the actual original work, and why we love them so much. So first, I kind of just want to run through everyone and let them introduce themselves and say how they're kind of part of the chat and what they're going to bring to it. So Andrea, if you want to kick us off.
Yeah, I'm Andrea Berthot. I just recently had my first novel come out. It's called The Heartless City, and it's a sort of retelling twist on The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. And so that is why I'm here.
Awesome. How about you, David?
Well, my name's David Hammons. I'm also debut author of my first book, which came out in September. It's Alice Takes Back Wonderland, and as you can tell, it's a retelling of the Alice in Wonderland mythos by Lewis Carroll, which is celebrating its 150th anniversary this year. So, not intentional, complete coincidence, but really cool.
All right. How about Ben?
Hi everyone, I'm Ben from BenjaminofTomes on YouTube, and I also am the media consultant for Curiosity Quills, which is really awesome. And I'm here today just to kind of put in some ideas and some extra chat themes. So I'm really excited about where this chat can go.
All right, and last but not least, Robyn.
Hi, my name is Robyn McIntyre, and I'm an author and artist. And lately I've been contributing to the Litchat website, and we put together chats with authors about their new books, and a lot of times we do discuss books that recycle literary themes.
Awesome. All right, thank you guys so much. I'm pretty excited to jump into this, so let's do that. But first I want to know, what are you guys' favorite fairy tale or classic works, and what is your favorite retelling on those works? Andrea, how about you start? We'll go in order.
Well, I really love the Gothic Victorian books. I loved Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, even though I actually really like the movie and like musical versions are actually kind of more entertaining than the actual book. But my favorite retelling of anything is actually the Mists of Avalon series by Marion Zimmer Bradley, which is not a take on Victorian Gothic literature. I just really like her telling the Arthurian stories from the women involved. I love those retellings.
All right, awesome. You stole one of my favorites, so I'm glad.
Oh, no, sorry.
How about you, David?
I'd say that as far as classic literature goes, you can't get much more classic than Don Quixote, it was weird. I came across this book knowing it was over 500-something years old, and I found myself in the first chapter actually laughing out loud at something. I was so transcendent knowing that this book for 500 years has made people laugh, and I am one of them, and it's still relevant, the literature, the work. That was just phenomenal. It's an experience I've not had with any other book. But my favorite retelling, I guess it's keeping in the theme of comedy, because I appreciate the difficulty of doing that, is The Word Sisters by Terry Pratchett, which is a retelling of Macbeth. Most of what Terry Pratchett, not all of what Terry Pratchett does, but he has a long list of, you could call them retellings, but they're in his own mythos too. So I just love the fact that he wove Macbeth in so perfectly into that story, and it worked really well.
Awesome, awesome. I have to admit, I am probably the only person in literary, anything that hasn't read Don Quixote.
It can be intimidating. It's so old, it's intimidating. You're like, how would this be funny? How would this be entertaining? It's centuries old. You'd think you have to read it as a literary exercise. Of course, that's what I think with Faulkner. So, you know, everyone has their own opinions, of course. I find Don Quixote more relevant than Faulkner, but that's just my opinion.
Sure. How about you, Robyn?
Well, it is Peter Pan's year, pretty much. We've got a Broadway show going on and a movie that came out called Pan, which has been universally panned. So I don't think that's going to make much money for 20th century this year. But I'd have to say that my favorite adaptation of that is a recent book by Lisa Jensen, and confession, she happens to be a friend of mine. It's called Hook, and it discusses how he came to be Captain Hook, and talks and brings the woman from 20th century or 21st century England into Neverland to help him overcome what has trapped him there.
That's really cool. I think I actually have heard of that, and it's probably on my to-do read. Or just to-do read, to read. How about you, Ben?
So I'm going to go from a different angle, and I'm going to talk Disney, because everybody loves a bit of Disney, and I have to admit the favorite story for me is most probably The Little Mermaid. So yeah, that would be my favorite, original. Well, from the actual original, not the Disney version. But going on to my favorite retelling at the moment, I really enjoyed Charming by Crystal Wade, which is a Krusty Quills publication, and that's a real horror take on the Cinderella story with really gruesome, suspenseful themes running throughout. Normally when I read, a book which is based off of a retelling, I always find it to be quite soft, fantastical. But this one went from a completely different angle. Cinderella's so beautiful and pretty and delicate, but in this novel it's so gruesome and different. So that would be my favorite retelling at the moment.
Awesome. All right. I think for me, but Mist of Avalon as well. I will give a shout out to that because it's fantastic. But I really like. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Ella Enchanted. But it's a Cinderella retelling, and it came out right after my 13th birthday, and I remember getting it as a late present from a friend, and I really liked Cinderella growing up, and so this was awesome because it was a more badass kind of Cinderella story, which was great. But it's definitely softer, like Ben mentioned. It's quite soft. And my second, probably I'm gonna name two because I can. I recently read The Rush, and I'm trying to remember who it's by here. I'm gonna pull it up. Oh darn, I can't remember right now, but it's the Siren Song series. I just read it recently, and I actually really liked it. I wasn't sure at first if I was going to. And it's not a very distinct retelling, but it's a retelling of sort of the whole siren situation. But it's also, Hades is there, Persephone is there, Zeus is there, all of the gods are there, so it's kind of a really interesting mythological approach, but it's from the siren's perspective and her not wanting to be able to be a siren, not wanting to be involved in that world at all, and almost being pimped out to make money, and it's a little bit harsher than a lot of retellings are, which I really liked.
I just looked it up. It's Rachel Higginson.
Oh, thank you. Gosh, I knew it was Rachel something, but I didn't want to say a last name and then have it not be her last name at all. Getting an email from her tomorrow. All right, that is fantastic. So, Ben, do you have any questions before I keep rambling on here?
Yeah, I do. And this is a very on-the-spot question. But I wanted to ask each person in the live chat, off the top of their head, the first thing they thought about, what would be a retelling you would write? What classic tale or Disney story would you rewrite? The first one that comes to mind. So, should we start with you, Nikki?
Oh gosh. I was please start with someone else. Wow, that's a really great question. So a fairy tale that I would kind of want to retell, right? Yeah.
The first one that pops to mind. The first thing that you just comes to mind.
I think I would probably do something with the Fates. The Three Fates. I think it would be really cool to, they in history or in mythology have had all kinds of different things, and usually they're not flattering. So I think it'd be really cool from your perspective. I
think I just read a book with the Three fates in. Amber Smoke by Kristen Cast that just came out recently. I believe that's got it at the beginning of that story.
Yeah. Well, I think I have it right here. So, I mean, this is called The Fates by Lainey Bross, and then Neil Gaiman, American Gods, has The Fates in it. Actually, the Siren, the Rush, the Siren Song series had The Fates in that. They're all over the place. If there's mythology, the Fates are usually involved, but it's never really usually about them. So I thought it would be really cool.
Sweet. Should we go to Andrea?
Yeah, that's funny because actually I'm thinking my next book is going to be a sort of retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses. There's a lot of YA books about that story, actually, and I like a lot of them. Mine, the way I'm thinking about it now, is these girls in, like, the Dust Bowl in Kansas who get to travel to this magical place somehow and have, like, the same kind of otherworldly dancing experience. So at least it doesn't exist yet. An outline exists now, but I love that story.
Awesome. Should we go to David?
Well, when you first proposed that, you said off the top of your head, and my head immediately went to what would my favorite author be to dive into their mythos. I mean, obviously, you had to skip a few generations because C.S. Lewis and all those things, they're not in the public domain yet, so I thought maybe Edgar Allan Poe, something in the Poe mythos and universe would be something really fun. But of course, practically speaking, his very singular stories. I'd love to do some sort of more drawn-out version of some of his, great stories that he's done. Add more to it. But then it has been on my mind a lot recently. Is a retelling of the Ice Queen legend. And of course, the reason that I've been thinking about it is because of the many fairy tales that Alice Takes Back Wonderland features, the Ice Queen is not one of them, and there's a reason for that. And so I'm considering how to implement that in a possibly future manuscript for that. So that mythos has been sort of on my mind.
Amazing. And Robyn?
I like a lot of folk tales. So I probably would go with something from another country or even another continent. There are some really great African folk tales that haven't been brought into our common knowledge, and they have a very rich kind of history. But as far as Western goes, I like the quirky, very small characters, so to speak, like Rumpelstiltskin.
That would be good.
Or possibly the Seven Dwarves from Snow White. So focusing on someone other than the main character.
Would you cast Rumpelstiltskin in a positive light or a negative light?
Probably both.
Ah, okay.
I think he's a lot more complicated than people give him credit for.
Yeah, I think if I was going to go for a retelling, I'm obsessed with the goddess Hecate in Greek mythology, and I believe she actually is originally a Titan, I believe. I'd love to see something with her in it. Now, she crops up in lots of books, with like Wiccan-based religions in the novels and whatnot. But I'd like to see like her story, and people. Some people describe her and say that she was a Titan. Well, how come she's the one? How come she's left and all the others, were killed off and stuff? So I'd like to know more about her story, I believe. So, yeah, thank you for answering my question and thinking about that one on the spot.
Puppy's trying to break down the door here. Awesome. That was a great question out of sort of left field there. Thanks a lot for that. Okay. So I would like to just take a few minutes and hear from Andrea and David, because they actually have gone through this process of not just what would you do if you did, but I already did that with their writing. So I'd love to hear sort of any difficulties or any interesting things you found. I think it's a really, really tricky line between having it be similar enough to be able to draw parallels to that retelling and not just use someone's name. And copying it and being too similar, so it's too predictable and not interesting. So Andrea, if you want to go first, I'd love your insights on that.
I didn't have to struggle too much with copying it because I basically took the general idea and then I my story takes place after Dr. Jekyll is already dead, and so it's like I changed his ending, where instead of him just self-destructing, he shared his drug with other people, and it created like a city full of Hydes, and London gets quarantined because of it. And so my story takes place 13 years later in the quarantined, Hyde-filled city. And so when Dr. Jekyll is mentioned, it's you know, in the past, and all of the characters are totally new people. They just live in a world that has been changed and altered because of the way I altered the ending of the original story. So I didn't really run into that a lot. There are some similar themes about like what is good and what is evil, and like how to defeat evil within ourselves. But mostly it's kind of its own story. It just took off of a twist on the world he created.
Awesome, awesome. And how about you, David?
Well, I probably came about this from a different direction than most retellings traditionally go through. Hi, puppy.
Oh, puppy.
I had just finished writing a parody book, which I've written a few of them, which, by the way, the parody book, Don't Eat the Glowing Bananas, is coming out through Curiosity Quills this December. But I just finished writing that, and I love writing parodies, so that's kind of where I came from. That was a retelling of the post-apocalyptic mythos, and I thought, okay, I've done that. What other genre can I do a parody of? Can I do a comedy of? And I thought, well, fantasy's done. Terry Pratchett's done that. Douglas Adams has sci-fi. There's not a lot, you know, and then Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett did Good Omens, so there's paranormal. So there's not a lot of genres that haven't been touched by comedy. And I thought, well, fairy tale retellings. No one's done a comedic fairy tale retelling, so I'll do that. And as I'm a big fan of Mel Brooks, and he says comedy is drama slightly to the left. So what you do is you take the traditional story that you're going to tell and you angle it a bit off. And that's where the comedy comes from. So I thought, okay, well, a fairy tale retelling is about retelling a classic story using those themes. So what if I just lumped all of them together, just brought dozens of fairy tales, lumped them together, and oh, and by the way, it's going to have Alice with a sawed-off shotgun, and it's going to be called Alice Takes Back Wonderland, and it's going to be nuts. And I just lumped all these things together in a big fruitcake of crazy. And I said, wait a second, where's the comedy? There's no room for comedy. My fruitcake is so dense of stuff, and I kind of like this story. So why don't I just take the comedy out, bring it back to center, and I've got all these other elements here, and really that became a balancing act of the themes. Because I think when you retell a fairy tale, you're fitting within a thematic box, but you're not in a plot box, if that makes sense. Like, you can change the plot of Cinderella, you know, like with the Cinder, what you were talking about, but the theme is still there. The theme of the orphan child and you know, the going to a ball, the magical influence, all that. That's a theme that you can fit within a whole lot of plots. And so that's really what it came down to. I'm gonna fit the theme and lump these themes all together and fit them within their own unique plots.
That's really interesting that you went from wanting to write a comedy to not at all, basically.
I know. It was. I thought, well, this is gonna. The reason that a lot of people say that the book is so insane in terms of its scale is because it originally was intended to be insane and intended to be silly and stupid. But I decided I liked it enough that I was like, I'm gonna not do this slightly to the left. I'm gonna do this straight. And I think that it was just a lot of fun to do.
Thank you so much, David. And Robyn, obviously, as a part of Litchat and just as an author and a reader and reviewer yourself, you have come across quite a few novels in your time and reviewed for a lot of them. And you guys have discussed all kinds of various topics in Litchat before. Is there any sort of qualities or trends that you kind of notice with adaptions or retellings that either really works or kind of causes them to, you know, fall by the wayside, or, you know, any sort of trend at all that you've seen?
Well, it's one of the things that David was talking about. How can you stretch the elements within a commonly known tale to make them fresh again. And we've touched on that already in the sense that you have to look for something, a what if, within the fairy tale or the story that you're looking for that makes people stop and think, wow, I've never even considered that aspect of it. And that's where you really get them. It's not enough to take the characters and put them in a different situation. You have to really be able to make that situation believable and interesting and be close enough that you could look at the original and say, yeah, now I go back and look at it, I can totally see that in there. And that's what makes, I think, what elevates something from just a retelling or a reboot of the tale and into something special.
Fabulous. I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, you said that, I don't know why this popped into my head kind of as you were talking, so you didn't actually say anything specific about it, but I was thinking how using classic fairy tales or classic folklore or anything like that can be used sort of to make statements or to talk about important issues in modern times. So, for example, you could do, a Cinderella retelling and instead have the prince actually be a princess and have it be, an LGBT-friendly sort of, situation that could be really, really huge for modern society to see. Because we really haven't seen a lot of stuff like that. So I think it's interesting how it can be a tool because we're so familiar with the sort of norms that they set up for us, if that makes sense.
Or what if Cinderella was actually a spy? She was sent to the palace.
That's interesting. That would be fun.
So, Robyn, next novel?
Possibly.
Guys, thank you so much. We are going to wrap up pretty soon here so we can start our live tweet chat. But I just kind of wanted to go around one more time and see if there's any kind of resounding thoughts or maybe last-minute book ideas for the next novel you guys are going to write. Let's start with Andrea.
I don't know. I kind of already talked about the next thing that I'm thinking about writing. My favorite kind of thing is retelling these original stories that have resonated, for hundreds and sometimes thousands of years with people, and I think there's a reason for that, and that's why it's my favorite stuff to read and my favorite stuff to write.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. How about you, David?
Well, I think that when we talk about retellings and shared mythos and sort of like that, I think that we need to be aware that all stories are in a way retellings. Every story, even, you talk about George Lucas has been interviewed talking about Star Wars, and he's like, this is not a new story. This is an old story of the farmer becoming hero story. And so what we're doing is we're taking literal retellings. We're taking actual named characters and moving them, using those themes in maybe modern guises or different situations or expanded on those themes. But this idea that if you could do a retelling of Cinderella by distilling it down to its essence, and now it's no longer Cinderella, but you've got the theme and essence of Cinderella for a whole new book that maybe even people who are reading it won't recognize it as Cinderella, but you as the author know that that's where the story began. That's the literary heart of your book. And I think that we can all appreciate the classic works in literature because they can be the catalyst for a brand new story that has nothing to do with Treasure Island or Don Quixote or whatever, but at its heart, that's where the story originates, and you've expanded to something brand new. But it's the same old story, but it's brand new and completely unrecognizable from the original. So I really like that concept of retellings can be an inspiration for brand new stories as well.
Awesome.
Fabulous. How about you, Robyn?
Distillation, I think that's what David was touching on. The thing about distillation is take a look at the fairy tale or the folk tale that you're going to reinterpret and break it down to what it symbolizes. What is it that Cinderella symbolizes? All of these tales are moral tales in their ways. All of them were novel and modern at the time that they came out, and they had a direct purpose. So what are the symbols that are involved in that story, and how can you reinterpret the story to touch on those symbols? Because we read the stories because we think we know what's going to happen. We think we know the characters. We think we know the plot. And it's the author's job to reinterpret that so that we get a surprise instead. It's not the same old thing, and it's definitely not what we expected.
I agree with Robyn.
Ben, I saved you for last because you obviously, as a booktuber yourself, have read quite a few novels as well, so I'd love to hear what you've sort of seen from this as well.
I think as a reader, you know, giving advice to maybe other young readers who are a bit skeptical of reading retellings just in case it, you know, damages their original views on the classic tale or folklore. I think the one thing that I have to say is, you know, every single retelling that comes along, I always give a try and always end up loving for different reasons. You know, it's with stories you read and you really, you know, immerse yourself in that story again, especially with the classic, you're like reliving it for a second time. So if you're, you know, just read, I can't give any advice on writing, you know, or anything too in depth, but, you know, just enjoy them for what they are and don't have any expectations when going into them.
Fabulous. Thank you guys so much for participating in this and giving us your perspectives. Everyone, as you may or may not know, we are going to be kind of live doing some tweet chatting after this so that you guys can tell us what you think and your favorite retellings and that sort of thing. So if you can make it, it's #ToldYouTwice, and I will see you shortly. Everyone, have a great day.
Thank you,
Bye.
Andrea.
Adios.
Thank you.